I've read a lot of books, but very few of them have really stumped me in the way that these have. And today we are going to talk about the five hardest books that I've ever read. They're difficult for different reasons, most of them, but yeah, there's a whole lot to be understood in these books, and there is, perhaps a second reading, perhaps a third reading, perhaps an infinite amount of readings that are necessary to fully grasp these books. And there's a certain funness to this. There's a certain kind of like you're going back looking for Easter eggs, or you're rewatching your favorite movie, seeing the things you didn't pick up the first time. And yeah, these are books that I'm probably going to reread at some point, and let's get into them. So the first thing is Fictions by Borges. This is Fictions or Ficciones, depends on the edition you get, but yeah, you need to pick up this book. It's one of the best books ever written, and the reason why it's difficult is because it's not necessarily difficult in this sense that it's written in some gaudy fashion, in some kind of intellectual idea of things, and I need to show you how smart I am, so I need to kind of make you feel dumb while you're reading this and overcomplicate it. No, Fictions is difficult to read because Borges is asking you to do the impossible. He's asking you to think about things that aren't possible. Think about ideas and paradoxes and kind of juxtapose this to the world as you know it. A good example of an idea that he puts forward is that there's this book that's infinite and it can only be described by the owner, but the owner is dead. So in fact, the book can never be understood and never be pieced together and never quite be grasped because it was an infinite chain of things, and that chain has been broken. Another such idea is Borges in this. I think it's called the Library of Babel. I want to make sure. I'll look back and I'll correct it in the description if I have it wrong. But there's a story in this book basically about a library, and it holds the recollection of all humanity and all of the memories and all of the stories that have been told and the stories that will be told. And there's very intricate design and all sorts of things, but really it's about the infinite nature of humanity, the infinite nature and unfolding about life. And through this metaphor, through this example, Borges is kind of trying to describe the pure essence of life and the pure idea of life, and how just grand and vast it is, and how we can never quite make sense of it. And through these stories, through these complex ideas, I really found a whole lot of depth and meaning. And a lot of the stories are like that. Some of them are more just normal stories, and it's a good mix of both. But that's why I include Borges on this list, because he's just so special. The next thing is a book I don't know if you even want to read. Borges described Ulysses by James Joyce as a book to be admired but not read. And what he means by this really exemplifies the entire essence of the book. So essentially, Joyce said this when he was writing Ulysses, or when he was publishing Ulysses, doesn't really matter, but he said, "I wrote every line with the intention to make English professors debate about what I was trying to say for the next 100 years. And boy, did he do this, because we are still debating it to this day, about 104 years later, I think, somewhere around 104 years since this has been published." And yeah, it's a book that mixes every single idea that Joyce ever had about anything into a jumbled kind of collection of chapters that are written in different styles, that shift perspectives, that kind of go to show you the essence of everything. And the problem with Ulysses is you can't just read Ulysses. You have to do years and years and years and years and years of research and study it with other people and read it out loud, and even sing some sections to even get what is going on. And there's so much packed into this book that yeah, it's a great task to undertake. I didn't do my due diligence when I first read it, and I kind of just went through it. I might return to it at some point, maybe not, but it's certainly one of those works that you look to and you kind of go, this was very experimental. I don't know if I quite like it. In some ways I do, in some ways I don't, but it certainly had to be on this list as one of the most difficult books that I have ever read. Next thing we have is The Red Book by Carl Gustav Jung. Infamous book. It was originally in these sets of journals, and they're very scribbly lines, and I'm shocked it ever came out, because This is one of the greatest psychologists of all time, basically admitting to some sort of mental illness or some sort of delusion, or I think Jung described it best when he opens the book and he says, to an outsider this might seem like madness, but to me this was the source of my development and the source of why I was such a great doctor, because I was able to face these struggles and overcome them. And I don't know how else to describe the Red Book aside from it's Jung's journey into his unconscious. It's Jung's journey into his imagination through a process he called active imagination. I do not suggest doing it, because if you read the book, you will understand why. But essentially, Jung is confronted with archetypes and archetypes from his unconscious and archetypes from the collective unconscious, and he's forced to deal with his own issues through the symbols of his mind. He is able to kind of grasp some sort of meaning and get some sort of ledge and pull himself back to the level of sanity that he was before he started going through this sort of mental breakdown. And the reason for the mental breakdown is also interesting and also a very significant shift in his life. It was very early on. Jung was basically brought up by Freud to be the next Freud, to really instill a lot of Freud's values and his theories, and almost extend his name and make Freud's legacy even greater. But Jung basically disagreed with him in the first real big book that he published, and essentially he was talking about a collective unconscious and other such ideas that Freud didn't really agree with, and sorts of things, and the ideas of faith and a higher power and some sort of essence that connects us all. That's really what Jung disagreed with Freud on, I think, to my recollection. But after the split, Jung kind of lost all of his reputation, and he kind of had to start from scratch, and this is what led to this period that created the necessity for Jung to confront his unconscious. And in this book, it reads like something Crowley would write. It reads like something I don't even know how to describe it. It's very reminiscent of any sort of Western esoteric kind of text, and there's some things you'll get from it. There's a lot that you won't get from it, but it's one of those books that if you get a single thread of information from it, you get a really deep insight onto the soul, and perhaps it's the insight you needed. But with that said, we'll move to the next one. The next one is the shortest book by far on this list, and this is the Tao Te Ching. Very short, and essentially what the Tao Te Ching is it's the Taoist text, and not much is known about it. We don't know if Lao Tzu was a real person. I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly. It could be an amalgamation of different works. Some people say it was a book written for rulers. Some people say it was a manual written for life. Some people say it was a collection of different ideas. Who knows? Just know that this book has certainly been debated since the moment it was written, and there are millions and millions and millions of interpretations, and you could read this book a million times and find something new from it each and every time. And that's what's perhaps most interesting about Taoism and the Tao Te Ching in a whole. And essentially the main idea of the Tao Te Ching is that there's a way of life that is in accordance with some universal force, and when you live in accordance with the force of existence, or the force of things, or the essence of things, then essentially you're going to live a great life. But when we force things, when we try to in some way push a certain action, when we try to resist our own nature, the nature of others, then we are going to be met with things that we don't necessarily want. So if we return to a more, I don't like to use it because I think it gets falsely equated with the ideas of like going out and living in a cabin in the woods. But when we live in course with the nature of things, then we live a greater existence. And the easiest way to describe everything I just said is eat when you're hungry, sleep when you're tired. That's the easiest way to put it. That's a Zen Buddhist saying, but it's very similar to the essence of the Tao Te Ching. And hopefully I didn't lose you there, because that was a lot of gobbledygook fun. Last thing we have is the Illuminatus trilogy. I read the first book in this series, which is The Eye in the Pyramid. I don't know if I understood a single page. I really don't know. It's a book that shifts perspectives. It's a book that has a schizophrenic narrator, or maybe it's not a schizophrenic narrator. Who knows what's true, what's not in this book. And it's intentionally forcing you to question things. It's intentionally forcing you to think about things. And Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson were very intentional when they wrote this. They threw a whole lot of 70s conspiracies and all sorts of weird ideas and weird occult themes in there, and just a whole lot of stuff to kind of throw you off the scent of things. And it's interesting. At the very least, you read this book and you're like, I don't know what I read, but I liked it. It was fun. It was all over the place, and it read like a fever dream. And yeah, with that said, here are the 5 hardest books I've read. Please let me know the books that you read that you found very difficult. Every once in a while, I'm open for a challenge in reading a book. Every once in a while, I like to read different styles. And whenever a book's very difficult, it's probably because the author tried to experiment with a unique style. And I like reading those kinds of things. So please, please, please recommend me these books. Half the reason I make these videos is so that people see it and they see the kind of stuff I like, and I get recommended stuff as well. So it's a win-win-win here. But yeah, with that said, I love you guys so much. Thank you guys so much. Peace out. I'll catch you in the next one.